Girls who rejected guys. In school, how did you feel when they became successful? Story 1. In 10th grade, I rejected Noah in front of everyone. He'd brought me a cheap bracelet and asked me to homecoming like it was a movie scene. I remember laughing, actually laughing, because my friends were watching, and I wanted to look untouchable. No, I said, loud enough for the table to hear. Try someone in your league. He didn't argue. He just nodded, face red, and walked away with that bracelet still in his hand. I didn't think about it again until 8 years later, when my manager sent a company-wide email. Please welcome our new vendor partner, Noah R. Attached was a link to a podcast interview. I clicked out of boredom and nearly dropped my phone. It was him. Same eyes, cleaner haircut, calm voice. He was talking about building a software company from his apartment, about getting rejected by investors, about learning how to be unembarrassable. He smiled when he said it, like it was funny now. A month later, our department visited his office for a demo. Glass walls, clean branding, people moving around like they were part of something important. He walked in mid-meeting and the whole room shifted toward him like gravity. He recognized me instantly. I know he did. His eyes flicked to my face, paused for half a second, then moved on. Thanks for coming, he said, professionally, like I was a stranger. After the meeting, I waited for a moment alone and blurted, Noah, it's me. From school. He tilted his head. Oh, yeah. Hi. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I started, rehearsing the apology I'd never written. I was really immature. He checked his watch. It's fine. We were kids. Then he added casually, you were practicing being cruel. I was practicing being rejected. Guess which skill paid better? I laughed like it was a joke. It wasn't. On the ride home, my coworkers kept saying how humble and nice he was. I stared out the window thinking about that bracelet in his hand, and how I'd never even let him finish his sentence. That night, I opened my old yearbook and found his photo. Under it, someone had written, quiet, but weirdly determined. I finally understood the feeling I'd been chasing in school. Power. And the sick part was realizing I'd had it once, cheaply, for 10 seconds. He earned his. Story 2. I didn't reject Mason with words. I rejected him with silence. He used to wait by my locker in 8th grade like a stray puppy, always smiling, always trying. Hey, Ava, he'd say, holding out a drawing or a candy he probably stole from his kitchen. I'd roll my eyes, grab my books, and walk past him like he was invisible. My friends would laugh behind me. That was the whole point. By senior year, he stopped showing up. I remember feeling weirdly offended, like he'd broken a rule I didn't know I'd made. Fast forward, I'm 26, scrolling through Instagram during a boring lunch break when I see my old friend tag someone in a post. So proud of you, Mason. The video was him on a stage, accepting an award for his nonprofit. Something about student mental health, anti-bullying, scholarships. He looked solid, grounded, like someone who slept at night. Then the comments hit me like a slap. People from our town were writing things like, you deserve this after what you went through. And, we're sorry we didn't see it. I felt my throat tighten because I remembered the exact thing I did see. I remembered the way he'd flinch when the popular boys walked by. I remembered how he still smiled anyway, like he could out-hope the humiliation. A month later, I went to my cousin's wedding back home. The reception had one of those guest book photo walls, and right there in the center was a framed newspaper article, Local Man Funds School Counseling Program, Mason's name. My chest did something stupid, like panic and pride tried to share the same seat. I asked my cousin, is he coming? She said, of course. He's basically paying for half this wedding. He's like the town hero now. When he arrived, people swarmed him. Handshakes, photos, tears. A teacher hugged him so hard he had to steady her. I hovered at the edge until he turned and saw me. He didn't look angry. That would have been easier. He just looked like someone trying to place a face from a distant dream. Ava, he said slowly. Hi, I whispered, and hated how small my voice sounded. I saw your work. It's incredible. Thanks, he said, polite. Then he added, you still live in the city? Yeah. Good for you. He nodded like that was the end of the conversation, and walked away to greet someone else. I stood there, watching him be celebrated, realizing the worst part. I'd always assumed he would grow up and become a sad story I could forget. Instead, he became the kind of person people thanked publicly. And I became the kind of person who couldn't even apologize without feeling like I was interrupting something bigger than me. Story 3. In high school, rejecting Trevor wasn't even controversial. It was expected. He was short, loud, always wearing knockoff sneakers, always trying too hard. He asked me out junior year in the hallway with a bouquet of grocery store flowers. My friends practically held their breath to see how I'd handle it. I did what I thought a high-value girl was supposed to do. I smiled like I was doing him a favor. "Ah, that's sweet," I said, taking the flowers just long enough for everyone to see. Then I handed them back. But no, I don't date guys who do this. His face fell. Someone snorted. I walked away with my head high, feeling like I'd just won something. 10 years later, I'm at a rooftop bar for a coworker's birthday when someone points at the TV above the counter. "That guy's everywhere," he says. He's like the new business guru. On the screen was Trevor, except he wasn't the hallway version. He was in a tailored suit on a talk show, casually joking about selling his first product out of his trunk. A banner under his name called him a founder and a self-made entrepreneur. The host asked how he stayed motivated. Trevor grinned. "Honestly, spite is underrated." Everyone laughed. I didn't. My coworker pulled up his company on his phone. Valuation numbers, articles, a podcast clip titled, "The people who laughed at you were your first investors. They invested in your rage." It was ridiculous how personal it felt, like he was talking directly to me through the years. 2 weeks later, my company announced a partnership. Trevor's company would be supplying our entire product line. Suddenly, his name was in my inbox every day. Then came the meeting. He joined on Zoom, camera crisp, background sleek. He scanned the grid of faces and stopped when he saw me. I saw the recognition register, small but unmistakable. He didn't call me out. He didn't smirk. He didn't even flinch. He just said, "Let's get into it," like nothing ever happened. Afterward, I messaged him privately on LinkedIn, because that's what adults do when they don't know how to be human. "Hey Trevor, not sure if you remember me from school. Just wanted to say congrats on everything." He replied within minutes. "I remember. Thanks." Then, after a pause, "Hope you're doing well." Then nothing. I stared at the chat for an embarrassingly long time, waiting for anger, for revenge, for some dramatic payoff. But the payoff was quieter and worse. He didn't need to hurt me to prove he'd won. My teenage self had wanted to feel superior for free. He'd built superiority so high it didn't even bother looking down. Story 4. I rejected Liam because I thought kindness was embarrassing. He was the boy who carried extra pencils, who held doors, who offered to walk girls home when it got dark. The kind of sweet that makes teenagers suspicious. He asked me to prom in a handwritten letter. Actual paper, folded neatly, like he'd practiced. My friends crowded around me in the cafeteria. "Read it out loud," they insisted. I did. I read the parts where he said I was smart and different, and my friends giggled like it was a joke. I felt heat rising in my face. Not from flattery, but from fear. Fear that if I accepted, I'd be labeled the girl who dated that guy. So I wrote no on the bottom of his letter in thick marker and slid it back across the table. "Sorry," I said with a shrug, pretending I didn't care. "I don't do charity dates." He didn't argue. He just picked up the letter, stared at the ink for a moment, and folded it back up like he could put the humiliation away if he was careful enough. Years passed. College, work, rent, real life. Prom became a blurry memory I only remembered when Facebook threw it at me. Then my mom called one afternoon. "Did you hear about Liam?" she asked. I almost laughed. "No, why would I?" "He's a doctor," she said. "Not just a doctor. He's on the news. He did something during that storm." I looked it up. There he was in scrubs, soaked, carrying an elderly woman through floodwater. The article said he'd stayed at the hospital for 3 days straight, slept on the floor, treated people for free when the system got overwhelmed. The comments were full of praise. "We need more like him. Bless this man. Hero." I felt a nausea I couldn't explain. A few months later, I went home for the holidays and stopped by the grocery store. I turned down an aisle and almost collided with someone. Liam. He was taller, older, but still had that same steady posture. He looked at me and smiled. Genuine. "Hey," he said, "it's been a while." My heart was beating like I'd been caught stealing. "Yeah. Wow. You're doing amazing things." He shrugged lightly. "Just doing my job." I swallowed. I was really awful back then. He didn't deny it. He didn't soften it either. He just nodded once. High school was messy for everyone. Then he reached past me, grabbed a carton of milk and said, "Take care," like that was all I deserved. I walked to my car and sat there gripping the steering wheel, realizing something humiliating. The boy I rejected because I thought he was too nice grew into a man the world trusted with life and death. And I'd spent years trying to look cool in rooms that didn't matter. Story 5. When I rejected Diego in 9th grade, I told myself it was about chemistry. If I'm honest, it was about status. Diego was new, quiet, and had an accent everyone mocked. He'd transferred mid-year, and the popular crowd treated him like background noise. For some reason, he picked me. He'd sit near me in math and leave little notes like, "Your laugh makes class less horrible." I should have been flattered. Instead, I felt exposed, like he'd seen me too clearly. One day after school, he waited by the bike racks and asked if I wanted to go out sometime. I didn't even look at him fully. I just said, "No. I'm not into foreign exchange student vibes." The words came out nastier than I intended. And the second I said them, I saw something in his face change. Not heartbreak, something colder, like a door closing. He nodded once and walked away. I didn't see him much after that. He kept his head down, graduated, disappeared. Life moved on. Until I started working in marketing and my boss announced a new client, a tech company expanding into our region. We were supposed to pitch them a campaign. "They're a big deal," my boss said. "The founder's a genius." At the kickoff meeting, the founder walked in. Diego. Not the boy by the bike racks. The man who owned the room without trying. He shook hands, spoke confidently, switched between languages like it was nothing. Everyone leaned in when he talked. Then his eyes landed on me. Just for a moment. Recognition flashed, quick and sharp, then it was gone. Like he'd filed me away years ago under irrelevant. During the break, my coworker whispered, "He's intense, huh? People say he built this from nothing. Like, literally came here with 2 suitcases." I felt my face burn because I remembered the exact way I'd said foreign exchange student vibes, like he was a joke. After the meeting, I approached him. "Diego," I said softly. "It's me. From school." He held my gaze politely. "Yes," he said. "I know. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I was ignorant." He nodded like he'd heard it before. "It's okay." Then he added, calm as ice, "Back then, you taught me something useful." "What?" I asked, almost hopeful. He smiled, small, controlled. "That some people only respect you after other people do first." I stood there, trying to breathe, while he walked away to join the executives. In that moment, I understood exactly how it felt. Not to be hated, not to be punished, just to be treated like a person who no longer mattered. And the worst part was realizing I'd given him that feeling first. In 9th grade. For free. Story 6. In school, I didn't reject Ethan with a clear no. I did that worst thing. I kept him around like a spare charger. He'd carry my books, fix my laptop, help me study, and I'd reward him with, "You're such a good friend," like it was a medal. When he finally asked me out senior year, I laughed and said, "Ethan, you're sweet, but you're not exactly boyfriend material." He went quiet for a second, then nodded like he understood. After that, he stopped answering my late-night, "Can you help me with this?" texts. I told myself he was being dramatic. 8 years later, my friend drags me to a charity gala. I'm wearing a dress I can't afford, pretending I belong. People are taking photos near a step-and-repeat backdrop, and someone whispers, "That's the youngest partner in the firm. Total machine." I turn and see him. Ethan, in a tailored suit, laughing with the kind of people who never laughed at him. My stomach dropped so hard I swear I felt it in my knees. I waited until he was alone near the bar and walked up like I deserved a moment. "Ethan? It's me." He looked at me politely, not warmly. "Yeah? Hi, I've seen your name everywhere," I said. "You're doing incredible." "Thanks," he replied, already scanning the room like he had somewhere better to be. I forced a smile. "Remember when we used to—" He cut in gently. "I remember you used to call me when you needed something." That hit like a slap. "That's not fair," I said automatically. "I was young. So was I," he said, still calm. "But I learned." Then he lifted his glass slightly in a polite goodbye and walked away to greet a senator's wife like it was normal. All night I watched him, confident, respected, wanted, and I realized the gross truth. I didn't miss him. I missed the version of myself who had someone that devoted for free. Story 7. In 9th grade, Ben made me a playlist. Like, a real one. He burned a CD, yes, I'm old, and wrote the track list in neat handwriting. He said every song reminded him of me. My friends begged to see it, so I brought it to lunch like a trophy. They read the song titles and started cackling. One girl said, "This is so cringe." Another said, "Ben thinks he's in a romance movie. I should have shut it down." Instead, I leaned into it. I walked up to Ben after school, handed him the CD and said loud enough for people to hear, "I'm not your manic pixie dream girl. Please stop." His face went pale. He whispered, "I just thought," "Yeah," I cut him off. "That's your problem." I didn't think about that CD again until years later when my brother sent me a link. "Isn't this your school guy?" It was a music video. Millions of views. Comments flying by. The artist name at the bottom, Ben. He wasn't just making music, he was huge. Tour dates, interviews, fans crying in comment sections about how his songs saved their life, and the part that made my skin crawl? His biggest hit was literally called Please Stop. In an interview clip, the host asked where the title came from. Ben smiled and said, "High school. Someone said it like I was embarrassing for feeling things." I kept the sentence. Changed what it meant. A few months later, I went to a concert with friends. He walked on stage, spotlighted, and the crowd roared like he was a religion. And for a second, I remembered him holding out that CD with hopeful hands. The guilt hit so hard I had to sit down. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel jealous. I felt exposed, like the world was cheering for the kid I helped break, and I was watching my own cruelty get remixed into something beautiful. Story 8. I rejected Marcus because he dressed weird. He wore thrift store jackets, carried books like armor, and talked about coding like it was a sport. When he asked me out, I didn't even pretend to be kind. I said, "No offense, but I'm trying to date someone normal." He blinked like I'd slapped him, then nodded and walked away fast. 2 years later, at graduation, he didn't even look in my direction. I told myself he was bitter, that I'd dodged something. Then adulthood happened. Bills, breakups, reality. One day, I'm job hunting and see a company name everywhere. New app, new funding, crazy growth. My friend goes, "You should apply." Their CEO is basically a legend. She pulls up an article. Marcus. Same eyes, same weird intensity. Now in a black turtleneck, smirking in front of a wall of screens like a movie villain. I panic applied anyway because rent doesn't care about karma. Weeks later, I get an interview. I walk into the building and see him through glass walls, talking to investors like he owned oxygen. He steps into the meeting room, looks at my resume, then looks at my face. Recognition flickers. He doesn't smile. "Hi," he says, professional. "Tell me about yourself." I do. I sweat. I perform. He listens like a judge. At the end, he says, "You have decent experience." My chest loosens. "So, do you think I'm a fit?" He pauses, then says, "No offense, but I'm trying to hire someone exceptional." He said it gently, calm, almost politely. I felt heat crawl up my neck because I heard my own high school voice echo in it. He stood, shook my hand, and walked out, leaving me sitting there with a rejection that felt like a mirror. Story 9. In school, I rejected Sam because he was too nice. That's what I told people. The real reason? He didn't make me feel important. He'd text good morning, ask how my day was, listen when I talked. It felt boring. So when he asked me to date, I said, "You're great, but I want someone with more edge." He smiled sadly and said, "Okay, I hope you find what you're looking for." I did. And it was a disaster. For years. Then at 28, I walked into a new gym and froze because Sam was at the front desk, not working there, owning the place. His name was on the wall as founder. The space was packed, clean, buzzing. People greeted him like family. I stood there, stupidly holding my water bottle like it could hide me. He saw me and smiled, real this time. "Hey," he said, warm. "Long time," I managed. "Wow, this is yours?" "Yeah," he said. "Opened my 3rd location last month." 3rd location. I laughed awkwardly. "You always were disciplined." He nodded. "I had to be. I spent a lot of time trying to become someone worth choosing." That sentence punched straight through my ribs, because I realized something. I taught him he wasn't enough. And instead of collapsing, he built a whole life that proved he was. When I left, I sat in my car and cried. Not because I wanted him, but because his success made my teenage choices feel small, shallow, and permanent. Story 10. I rejected Devin in class because I wanted the room to love me more than I wanted him to feel okay. He asked me out during a group project. Quietly, respectfully. And I said, "Devin, you're like my brother." Then, because my friends were watching, I added, "And I'm not into incest." The laugh from the table was instant and ugly. Devin didn't laugh. He stared at his notebook like it was suddenly fascinating. He whispered, "Okay," and never spoke to me again. Years later, my friend drags me to a networking event. I'm bored until the keynote speaker gets announced. People start clapping like it's a celebrity. A man walks on stage, confident, polished, smiling. Devin. He was giving a talk about leadership and resilience. He told a story about being humiliated young and deciding he'd never let someone else control his self-worth again. The audience laughed at the light parts, nodded at the serious parts, applauded like he was preaching. After, there was a meet and greet. I stood in line like an idiot, heart hammering, rehearsing apologies in my head. When it was my turn, he looked at my name tag, then my face. His smile didn't change, but his eyes sharpened slightly. "Hi," I said. Devin, I'm sorry. About school. I was cruel. He held my gaze for a long second, then said, calm as glass, thank you for saying that. Relief flooded me. Too fast. Then he added, I forgave you years ago, but I didn't forget what you enjoyed. I blinked. He leaned in slightly, voice still polite. Having an audience. Then he stepped back, smiled for the next person, and I walked away shaking, because he hadn't yelled, hadn't insulted me. He'd just named the truth out loud. And somehow that was the most humiliating part. Story 11. In high school, I rejected Tyler because I thought I was doing him a favor by being honest. He asked me out after chemistry, cheeks red, hands shaking. I glanced at his wrinkled shirt, his cheap backpack, the way he was always trying to blend into the wall. I said, Tyler, I'm going to save you the embarrassment. Girls like me don't date guys like you. He swallowed hard and nodded like he'd just been given a diagnosis. Okay, he whispered. Thanks. The worst part is I felt proud, like I'd just stated a fact of nature. 10 years later, I'm at a friend's engagement party. There's a live band, an open bar, and a crowd of people wearing money like perfume. My friend squeals and pulls me toward a group near the patio. I have to introduce you to my fiance's best friend, she says. He's basically the reason my fiance can afford this ring. A man turns around with a glass in his hand, smiling politely. Tyler. Not the shy kid version, the adult version. Sharp haircut, calm posture, watch that probably cost more than my car. Everyone around him kept touching his arm like they were trying to borrow his confidence. He recognized me. I saw it. But he didn't give me the satisfaction of a reaction. I tried to laugh it off. Tyler, wow, you look different, he offered, pleasant. Yeah, time does that. My friend gushed about his company, his investments, how he bought the lake house like it was a sandwich. Tyler listened like it was normal. When we finally had a quiet moment, I blurted, I owe you an apology. I was awful to you. He tilted his head. You were direct. That's a nice way to say it. He shrugged. It helped. Helped? I echoed, stunned. He smiled, small, controlled. It made things simple. I stopped trying to impress people who already decided I wasn't worth it. I started building things instead. He said it without venom. That's what made it brutal. Because there was no fight to win, no forgiveness to earn, just a reality where he'd outgrown the version of me who thought I was above him. Story 12. I rejected Jaden because I thought his ambition was cringe. He used to talk about starting a brand and making something big, like he could will it into existence. Most guys in our class cared about sports and parties. Jaden cared about designs, business plans, weird motivational books. I found it embarrassing. When he asked me out junior year, I smirked and said, you're cute, but you're like, always trying to sell something. I'm not dating a walking TED Talk. His smile slipped. I'm just trying to be better, he said quietly. And I'm just trying to have fun, I replied. Like that made me superior. After graduation, he disappeared. I stayed in town for a while, worked retail, bounced between relationships that went nowhere. Then one day I'm scrolling online and I see a billboard photo on a local news page, a clothing line launching downtown. The logo is clean, modern. The founder is in the picture holding giant scissors at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Jaden. I clicked the article. It wasn't just a clothing line. It was a chain, backed by major investors donating profits to youth programs. He looked confident, like he'd finally become the person he kept describing. I told myself, good for him. But my chest felt tight, like the air had gotten meaner. A week later, I walk into a coffee shop and see him sitting at a table with 2 laptops, a meeting happening around him like he was the sun. He glanced up and our eyes met. He smiled warmly. Hey, long time. My brain short-circuited. Jaden, wow, you did it. He chuckled. Still doing it, I swallowed. I was thinking about school. And I'm sorry. I was dismissive. He nodded slowly. You weren't the only one. That should have comforted me, but it didn't. I asked, did it ever bother you? What people said? He leaned back and said, almost kindly, it did. For a while. Then I realized the people who mocked my goals didn't have goals. They had opinions. I drove home feeling like I'd been put in my place without being insulted once. Story 13. I rejected Connor because my friends dared me to. That's the truth. He was a sweet, awkward kid who kept writing me notes in study hall. Harmless, respectful, a little cheesy. My friends found it hilarious. They decided to help by staging a moment in the cafeteria. When Connor walked up with a nervous smile, one of my friends whispered, destroy him. So I did. I said, Connor, you know I'd never date you, right? Like, be serious. The cafeteria erupted in laughter, and Connor's face changed from hopeful to blank so fast it scared me. He didn't even look sad. He looked empty, like he'd turned off. He didn't speak to anyone for the rest of the year. People said he was weird after that. I pretended it wasn't because of me. Years later, I'm at my cousin's wedding. The photographer is giving directions, and everyone's obeying like he's a general. He's professional, confident, moving around like he owns the chaos. Then he turns toward me and I recognize him. Connor, same mouth, same eyes, different energy, focused, self-assured, not asking permission to exist. At the reception, my aunt leaned in and said, "Isn't he talented? He travels all over. Celebrities hire him." Celebrities. I caught his eye across the room and he nodded politely, like I was any other guest. That politeness made me feel smaller than if he'd glared. Later, near the bar, I forced myself over. "Connor," I said. "It's me. From school." He paused, scanning my face, then said, "Yeah, I remember." "I'm sorry," I blurted. "About the cafeteria. I was cruel. I was trying to impress people." He listened without expression, then took a slow sip of water. Finally, he said, "That was the day I stopped thinking I needed anyone to like me." I whispered, "I ruined you." He shook his head. "No. You focused me." He walked away to photograph my cousin's first dance, and I stood there realizing he'd turned my worst moment into his turning point. That didn't make me feel better. It made me feel responsible in a way I couldn't undo. Story 4. I rejected Amir because my parents didn't like his last name. I know how awful that sounds now, but when you're 17 and your world is rules, you don't question the rules. You just enforce them. Amir was smart, funny, the kind of guy who could make a boring class feel like a secret party. He asked me out after debate practice, and I wanted to say yes so badly my voice shook. But I heard my mom's voice in my head, "Not that kind of boy. Not that kind of family." So I said, "I can't. My parents would never." He stared at me for a long moment and asked softly, "Is it me or my name?" I didn't answer, which was an answer. He nodded like he'd expected it and walked away without looking back. I didn't see him after graduation. Until I did. A few years later, my dad is watching the news and a segment comes on about a young attorney who just won a high-profile case. The kind that gets people arguing online. My dad mutters, "This guy's sharp." I look up. Amir. Suit. Calm eyes. Confident voice. He was speaking about justice and fairness with this quiet intensity that made the anchor listen instead of interrupt. My stomach twisted because my dad kept watching like he respected him. The irony burned. Weeks later, I saw Amir at a community event. He was one of the speakers. People lined up to shake his hand like he was a local hero. I stood at the edge, shaking, waiting for a gap. When I finally approached, he looked at me and smiled politely. "Hi," he said, like we'd never shared anything. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I was weak." He studied me for a second, then said, "You weren't weak. You were loyal to the wrong people." That sentence made my eyes sting because it was true, and because it meant he didn't hate me. He just understood me. And somehow that felt worse. Story 15. I rejected Nolan because I thought he'd never leave our hometown. He was the guy everyone liked but nobody took seriously. Always making jokes, always working part-time, always talking about one day like it was a place you could drive to. When he asked me out senior year, I said, "Nolan, you're fun, but you're not going anywhere. I need someone with a future." He laughed like it didn't hurt. "Fair," he said, and walked away. I went off to college feeling like I'd made the smart choice. I dated future guys. Internships, finance bros, 5-year plans. None of them made me feel safe. They made me feel like an accessory. Years later, I'm stuck in an airport during a delay, scrolling on my phone, when I see a familiar face on a screen across the terminal. A travel show is playing. Some segment about entrepreneurs building businesses abroad. There's Nolan, standing in front of a restaurant with his name on the sign. I get closer. The caption says he's the founder of a fast-growing hospitality group. The host is joking about how Nolan turned a food truck into an empire. Nolan laughs, confident, relaxed, like life finally fits him. I felt my throat tighten because I remembered telling him he wasn't going anywhere. Then my phone buzzes with a notification. A mutual friend posted a photo. Nolan is back in town for a day, donating money to renovate our old school's cafeteria. The caption reads, "He promised he'd come back and take care of people. He actually did." That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the post, realizing something humiliating. I didn't reject Nolan because he lacked a future. I rejected him because I couldn't imagine a future where I was wrong about him. And now his success wasn't just success, it was proof. Story 16. I rejected Owen because he was too eager. He asked me out sophomore year with that nervous, hopeful smile guys get when they've rehearsed the sentence 10 times. I was standing with my friends and one of them had already decided it would be funny if I crushed him. So I did it cleanly. "Owen, you're sweet, but you're not my type." You're like a golden retriever. I don't date golden retrievers. My friends exploded laughing. Owen tried to smile like he got the joke, but his ears went red and he left so fast he almost tripped. 2 years later, he transferred schools. I told myself it was unrelated. At 27, I'm on LinkedIn at 2 a.m., spiraling about my job, when I see a post going viral. Proud to announce our Series B. The founder's photo makes my stomach clench. Owen. Same name, same face, different everything. Sharper, calmer, like someone who learned how to carry himself like a decision. The post is full of congratulations from people with titles that sound expensive. I click his profile. Ivy League MBA. Startup exit. New company. Photos with people I've only seen in articles. A week later, my company hosts a tech networking mixer. I show up because my boss says it's important for visibility. I'm juggling a drink and pretending I'm not intimidated when I see him across the room. Owen, surrounded by people who want something. He spots me and walks over with an easy smile. My chest tightens. I expect him to say something sharp. Instead, he says, "Hey, you went to Westbrook, right?" I blink. "Yeah," he nods. "Nice. Small world." That's it. No mention. No payback. Nothing. And somehow that's what makes me panic. I fill the silence with, "You're doing really well." He shrugs. "I got lucky. And I worked. A lot." I force myself to say it. "I was mean to you in school." He looks at me, expression unreadable. Then he says, almost thoughtfully, "Yeah, you were." I wait, bracing. He continues calm, but honestly, it clarified things early. I stopped thinking I had to be likable to be valuable. He smiles politely. "Anyway, good seeing you." He steps away like the conversation cost him nothing. I stand there realizing the brutal truth. He didn't need revenge because he'd already escaped the universe where my opinion mattered. Story 17. I rejected Chloe, yes, a girl, because I was terrified. Freshman year, she sat behind me in English and wrote notes in the margins of my notebook when the teacher wasn't looking. Little jokes. Tiny hearts. Once, after class, she asked if I wanted to hang out sometime. My stomach flipped. Not because I didn't like her, but because I did. And I panicked. I said, "Sorry, I'm not into that. Also, you're kind of intense." Her face went still. "Got it," she said quietly, and never tried again. In school, I told people she was weird, so they wouldn't suspect I'd cared. That's the part I still can't say out loud. Years later, I'm scrolling through TikTok and see a clip of a woman speaking on a stage. The caption says, "From bullied kid to best-selling author." I stop because the voice is familiar. It's Chloe. She's older, obviously, but the same eyes. She's speaking with this steady confidence about identity, self-respect, and not shrinking to make other people comfortable. The room is packed. People are crying, cheering. I look up her name. Book tours. Interviews. Millions of followers. Comments like, "You saved me." Then I see an upcoming event. A reading in my city. I go. Not for closure. At first I tell myself it's curiosity. But really, I want to see if she remembers me. After the talk, there's a line for signatures. When it's my turn, she looks up, and for a second her expression flickers. Recognition. Quick and sharp. "Hi," I whisper. "You probably hate me." She studies me, then smiles politely. "I don't hate you. I was cruel," I say, voice shaking. "I rejected you because I was scared, and then I made you the joke." She looks down at the book, uncaps her pen, and writes something inside. She slides it back to me. I look. She signed it, and underneath wrote, "Thank you for the lesson." I stopped asking small people for permission. Her eyes meet mine. "I hope you're doing okay," she says, genuinely. Then she calls. Next, I walk away with the book pressed to my chest, feeling like she'd forgiven me without giving me access to her life. Like she'd turned my worst moment into a paragraph in her origin story, and I didn't get to edit it. Story 18. I rejected Lucas because he got suspended. That was the rumor anyway. Bad kid. Anger issues. Trouble. The truth was more complicated. His dad had just died. He was failing classes because he was working nights. Nobody cared. They just labeled him. He asked me out behind the gym, hands shoved in his hoodie pockets. "You want to go get food sometime?" he said, like it wasn't a big deal. I said no. I don't date guys who are problems. His jaw tightened. "I'm not a problem," he said quietly. I shrugged like I didn't hear him. Whatever. A decade later, I'm at a corporate training seminar I don't want to be at. The speaker walks in. A consultant hired to teach resilience under pressure. He's confident, funny, and the room actually listens. Then he says his name. Lucas. My pen slips. I look up and it's him. Older. Built like he still carries heavy things, but his eyes are calm now. He talks about grief, anger, Rebuilding yourself. People are nodding like he's giving them oxygen. During Q&A, someone asks how he turned his life around. Lucas smiles and says, I got tired of being treated like the worst thing that ever happened to me. After the session, there's a small group around him. I wait until it thins and approach, heart pounding. Lucas, I say. He looks at my badge and then my face. Yeah, he says, immediate. I know, I'm sorry, I blurt. I judged you. I didn't know what you were dealing with. He pauses, then says, you knew enough to choose what was easy. That stings, because it's true. I try to explain myself, but he cuts it off with a gentle shake of his head. Listen, he says, not unkindly. You don't need me to forgive you for you to be better now. He walks away to talk to someone else, leaving me with the kind of guilt that doesn't burn hot. It burns slow, like it's meant to last. Story 19. I rejected Hannah's brother Shane because I wanted Hannah to like me more than I wanted to be fair. Shane was shy, kind of nerdy, always trying to fit into his sister's loud, popular world. He asked me to the winter dance. Hannah was right there, watching, smirking like she was about to rate my performance. So I said, no, like it was instinct. Then I added, why would I ever? Hannah laughed. Shane's face crumpled and he walked away. Later, Hannah said, you handled that perfectly, like I'd passed a test. Years later, Hannah invites me to her birthday dinner downtown. We're doing it at this new place, she says. It's impossible to get into. My brother got us in. I almost choke. Your brother? The restaurant is stunning. Everyone is dressed up. A man comes out to greet our table, confident, calm, owning the room with a smile. Shane. Not the boy I said you to, the owner. Hannah squeals and hugs him, acting like she always supported him. This is my brother, she tells everyone like it's a flex. Shane's eyes move to me. He pauses for half a second. Then he smiles politely. Hi, he says, like he's greeting a customer. During dessert, Hannah jokes loudly. Remember when you used to have a crush on Ava? My stomach flips. The table laughs. Shane sets down a tray and looks at Hannah with calm, flat eyes. Don't do that, he says. Hannah blinks, shocked. What? I'm joking. Shane's voice stays even. You used to enjoy humiliating me. I let it go. But don't try to make it cute now. The table goes silent. Hannah's smile collapses like paper in water. She stammers. I didn't. Shane turns to me. Enjoy your meal, he says politely, then walks away. I sit there frozen, realizing he didn't just defend himself. He exposed her. And I was complicit once. The power dynamic had flipped so completely it felt unreal. That night, Hannah texted me furious messages about her ungrateful brother. And for the first time, I didn't defend her. I just stared at my phone thinking, he didn't get successful just to prove me wrong. He got successful so he could finally tell the truth in rooms where people had to listen. Story 20. I rejected Nate because he cried. We were 16, paired for a presentation. He was stressed, trying so hard, and when the teacher criticized him in front of the class, his eyes watered. Later in the hallway, he apologized to me for being embarrassing. I said, yeah, it kind of was. I can't deal with sensitive guys. He went silent. Okay, he whispered. My friends found out and made it a joke. Don't cry, Nate, they'd say, laughing. He stopped speaking in class after that. Years later, I'm doom-scrolling when I see a clip from a documentary series about emergency responders. There's a man giving an interview, fire captain, decorated, respected. He's describing pulling a child from a burning apartment. Voice steady, eyes wet. It's Nate. The narrator calls him a leader known for calm under pressure. The comments call him a hero. I feel sick, because I remember calling him sensitive like it was an insult. A few months later, there's a fundraiser for a local firehouse. My coworker drags me. I walk in and see him immediately. Nate, taller, broader, wearing a uniform that makes people stand straighter. He spots me and nods politely like he does to everyone. I approach, hands shaking. Nate, it's me. From school. He studies my face, then says, yeah, I remember. I'm sorry, I say. For what I said, I was cruel. He holds my gaze for a long moment, then says quietly, you weren't wrong that I was sensitive. My chest tightens. He continues, calm. You were wrong that it was a weakness. Then he steps away to greet donors, leaving me standing there with the memory of my teenage voice. Small, sharp, and stupid. Echoing next to the man he became. Story 21. I rejected Derek because he was broke, and I said it out loud like it was funny. He asked me out junior year outside the cafeteria. Want to go to the movies this weekend? He said, trying to sound casual. I looked at his scuffed shoes and the way he always wore the same hoodie. I laughed and said, with what money, Derek? His smile froze. A couple of my friends laughed too, because laughing meant they didn't have to feel awkward. Derek nodded slowly and said, "Right. My bad." After that, he stopped showing up to anything. He worked after school, weekends, all the time. People called him lame. I joined in because it was easier than admitting I'd been cruel. 9 years later, I'm at a friend's housewarming. Everyone's touring the place, and someone points at the huge renovation photos on the fridge. "My contractor is insane," my friend says. "He's expensive, but he's the best in town." Then Derek walks in through the back door carrying a clipboard. For a second, I think he's just delivering something. Then my friend claps him on the shoulder and says, "This is Derek. He basically rebuilt the whole place." Derek looks up and our eyes meet. Recognition hits, and I feel my stomach twist. He doesn't react much, just gives a polite nod like I'm not special. I try to recover. "Derek, wow, you're doing great." He glances at the room like he's measuring walls in his head. "Yeah, busy." I force an awkward laugh. "Guess you have money now, huh?" He pauses and looks at me calm. "I always had money," he says. "I just didn't have parents paying my bills." The room goes quiet. My friend coughs like he wants to change the subject. Derek doesn't look angry. He looks done. Then he checks his watch and says, "I've got another site to visit. Congrats on the house." And he leaves. I stand there feeling exposed, because he didn't flex a car or a watch. He flexed something worse. Proof that my joke was built on ignorance. Story 22. I rejected Keenan because I thought he was too quiet, and my friends told me quiet meant weak. He asked me out in the library, whispering like he didn't want to disturb the books. "If you're free Friday, maybe dinner?" His hands were shaking slightly, which I found annoying at the time. I rolled my eyes. "No, I like guys who actually have confidence." He blinked. "Okay," he said softly, and went back to his book like he could hide inside it. Years later, my boss sends me to a negotiation meeting with a new supplier. "Their lead is intense," he warns. "Don't let him push you around." I walk into the conference room and see a man standing by the window, calm, composed. He turns, extends a hand. It's Keenan, but not the library Keenan. This Keenan speaks slowly, deliberately, like he's choosing each word for impact. Everyone in the room listens when he talks. When someone interrupts him, he simply pauses until they stop, and somehow that silence feels like power. Halfway through, he says, "We're not moving on price," my boss whispers. He's a wall. After the meeting, I'm packing my bag when he approaches. "You went to Northview, right?" he asks. My heart jumps. "Yeah," I say, trying to sound casual. He nods. "I thought so." I swallow. "You're very different now." He gives a faint smile. "I'm the same. I just learned not to waste words." The air between us feels heavy. I decide to apologize. "I was rude to you in high school," I say quickly. "I'm sorry." He considers me for a moment, then says, "You weren't rude. You were predictable. You chose what looked impressive." Then he picks up his briefcase and adds politely, "Have a good day." I stand there realizing I used to think confidence was volume. Now I know confidence can be a quiet person refusing to bend. Story 23. I rejected Evan because my friends were obsessed with levels, and Evan didn't rank high enough. He asked me out after practice, sweaty and smiling, holding 2 sports drinks. "I got your favorite," he said, proud like he'd solved a puzzle. I looked past him and said, "Evan, you're nice, but you're not exactly popular. I don't want people to think I'm desperate." His smile fell slowly. "Oh," he said, like the word had weight. Then he handed me the drink anyway and walked off without it. That should have haunted me. It didn't. Not then. 7 years later, I'm scrolling and see a viral clip. A guy in a hard hat being interviewed at a construction site. The caption reads, "Youngest project manager in the city. It's Evan." He's laughing, talking about how he worked his way up from the bottom, how he studied at night, how he didn't care if anyone thought he was cool as long as he was useful. Then I see another clip. He's proposing to a woman at the opening of a new community center his team built. Everyone's cheering. The woman is gorgeous, radiant, and she looks at him like he hung the moon. I watch it 3 times, sick with a feeling I don't want to name. Months later, I end up at the same community center for a volunteer event. A coordinator points across the room and says, "Go thank Evan. This place exists because of him." I walk over, heart pounding. He turns, recognizes me instantly, and his expression doesn't change much, just a neutral politeness. "Evan," I say. "Hi, I saw what you've been doing. It's amazing." "Thanks," he says. I try to joke. "Guess being not popular didn't stop you." He finally smiles, but it's not warm. "No," he says. "It just stopped me from wasting time on people who cared about that." I want to apologize, but his phone buzzes and he steps away to take a call. I'm left standing there realizing the hardest part isn't that he became successful. It's that he became successful without needing my approval, and teenage me had assumed he'd always want it.